Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Soft Magnetics.
Hard topics.
I am Bridget,
And I'm Mike.
and today we are hoping to go over a topic that resonates with you. So we've been getting a lot of questions about dimensional resonance. Now you get my joke from a minute ago. So Mike's going to go over dimensional resonance, and I'm going to cut to him, and you're going to take it away, right? Teach the people what they asked to learn about.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So dimensional resonance. And this is a topic that a lot of people are researching. A lot of people much smarter than me are researching. But here's kind of what we know so far. So a little bit of it is in the name, resonance. That's kind of what's happening. But just to give you a general idea of the effect, we have a toroidal core here with the cross section here taken out of it. And, just imagine there's two of these things. They're slightly different dimensions. So in one, we have a square cross section that is 10, pick your units, millimeters, we'll go with that, by 10, and 5 by 10 for another one. So the material properties, in theory, should be the same between those two different cores. In reality, that's likely not what you're going to see. So the red core, colored in red here, this is the complex permeability curve, and there's no numbers on this because it's just an example. But you can see the red solid line here is representative of the reactive portion of the permeability of that core. The dotted red line is representative of the lossy portion of that red core. So as it happens with almost every ferrite material, or every ferrite material that I'm aware of, they at some point will drop off. You're going to lose the reactive portion of that permeability. The lossy portion will get high to a point and then also drop off. But by just changing the one dimension on the cores, we could get something more like this blue line here, where the permeability at low frequency doesn't really change in magnitude much, but it gets shifted out to a much higher frequency. So it's able to maintain that permeability out to a higher frequency. The losses stay low out to a higher frequency. And the reason that's happening is complex, and we don't have all of the answers as to why that happens. But part of the reason that happens has to do with basically the effective wavelength inside the material gets changed depending on the material. So we can look at the change in effective wavelength with this formula up here. So using the complex permeability and complex permittivity of a ferrite material, we can calculate how that effective wavelength changes with frequency. So what starts to happen, you could have two materials with basically the same or at least very similar complex permeabilities behave very differently when the sizes of the cores are changed. And that's coming down to the permittivity, which is not something that's super well characterized in magnetics in general. But you can get some kind of clues about this looking at material data sheets, looking specifically at the resistivity of a material. So manganese zinc materials are going to be fairly conductive with low bulk resistivities. That's going to be an indicator of having high permittivity. Nickel zincs are the opposite of that. They'll have bulk resistivities in the megaohm to gigaohm centimeter range. They're going to have pretty low permittivities. What effectively is happening is that manganese zinc with the high permittivity is going to have a much smaller effective wavelength. Now, when that effective wavelength starts getting close at certain frequencies to the dimensions, physical dimensions of the core, you start having the possibility of resonance and like standing wave formation inside the core. That's what you're actually seeing here. So basically, high permittivity materials are going to be more apt to this than low permittivity materials. Realistically, every material is subject to this at some frequency. It's just the fact that the sizes cores come in and the frequencies that they're being used at, a lot of times you won't notice this effect on something like a nickel zinc core because it's being used at too low of a frequency to care about something like this, or the core is not large enough to care about something like this at frequencies it's operating at. Manganese zincs, however, when they're starting to operate in the megahertz range, high hundreds of kilohertz range, and especially in larger core sizes, this starts becoming a serious issue, and the losses at the core will shoot up. The inductance, if you're making something like an inductor, that could drop off at a much lower frequency than you expect. So this is kind of what we know so far. So what seems to be the thing that affects it, and this is still an area of research, I'm mentioning just reducing one dimension in the cross-sectional area. One of the things that seems to have the strongest correlation based on testing that we've done is reducing just one of these two dimensions in the cross-section seems to be a huge thing that changes where that resonant point is for the core. Now, there's probably some component in there with the magnetic path length of the core. So this kind of circular distance around the toroid, that probably has some factor to play into there, but the correlation hasn't been as strong as it has been just shrinking one dimension. The overall area also doesn't seem to correlate as well as just kind of a singular dimension being reduced. So just something to break up that wave formation seems to be, at least as of right now, what's going to be your main determination, whether a materials or a core shape specifically is going to suffer from this. And yeah, I think that's kind of what we know so far. If all of this is completely wrong, please leave it in the comments. But I think there's a lot of people kind of researching this right now. You know, one from the materials end, what can we do on a material point of view to better guard against things like this? And also what can be done with geometries to not need new materials to make significantly higher performance parts. So a lot of cool stuff that could be done with this. And it's not even always a bad thing. Just kind of as a last aside, if you're trying to make a suppression core that suppresses down at a lower frequency, well, guess what? You can kind of leverage this, get a really thick core. It'll suppress down at lower frequencies. Anyway, thanks.
All right, thanks, Mike, for covering dimensional resonance, and we hope it
kept you awake.
Resonated.
Resonated with you.
All right, and thank you. Can you like and subscribe and comment any other future videos you want us to cover? Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.